Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you are keeping safe during this COVID-19. Welcome to FIDIC webinar on COVID. This is the 8th of our series program. We started a little while ago where we looked at the very first one, where we dealt with how is the COVID impacting our industry. And we had over 500 people that attended that. We're really delighted with that. We follow with the second one, which will focus on force majeure, and we had close to 850 people that attended that. Then followed by joint venture, which again was equally highly attended, close to 600 people. And we looked at issue of the impact of COVID-19 on the consultancy and engineering sector. We had close to 900 people that attended that. We then looked at insurance and looked at ADR, where we had ADR close to 1,000 people that joined us. This session is focusing about the impact on our people, the employee, health and safety. We hope to spend 1 hour, 30 minutes with you. Wherever you are around the world, please keep safe while we are in this conversation. I'm delighted to have a number of eminent speakers from around different parts of the world. This program will take 1 hour, 30 minutes. I'm going to spend 5 minutes to do a quick introduction. At the end of that, I will bring the president of FIDIC to say a few words to us. We'll have 4 panel speakers. Each of them will take about 10 minutes maximum to share their thoughts on the subject. Thereafter, I will open up with a Q&A session, which will start off for me. And at about 1 o'clock, my team will open up the chat floor for comments to come through, including questions. And during that period, I will pick up the question from the floor and pass it across into the panelists. On that note, I think it's fair to say that the world has faced a number of challenges over the last 7 or 8 weeks. Different parts of the world are facing the issue at different timing. The big issue now is not about what is it, the question is how do we come out of it? And what does it mean for industry? What does it mean for people? What does it mean for employers? What does it mean for our business? And the topic we are dealing with today is about really people and impact. And from that point of view, what we hope to cover is how is this COVID impacting our people and how is it impacting their ability to deliver and their health and safety? How have they dealt with it during the period? And what measures are they going to put in place now that people are looking to get back to work? And while people talked about, the new norm will be significantly different from what it used to be. We are moving into uncharted territory. There is a question out there, is the COVID-19 going to be a V shape or a U shape or a W shape? In another word, are we likely to suffer another impact later in the year? And if that's the case, what will be the impact on people, on our society, and our ability to deliver the service that we do for our industry? On that note, I am going to invite our president, Bill Howard from United States, to share some few words with us on the subject and also to welcome us. Bill, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Nelson, for the introduction. And first of all, I'd like to thank you and the Secretariat for putting these webinars together under very challenging circumstances. Most of the Secretariat, like the rest of the folks in our companies, are working from home. And putting these webinars together successfully on a remote basis under normal conditions would be a challenge. It's just an incredible, great reflection on the Secretariat and you, Nelson, that we're able to do this successfully remotely. As you mentioned, this is the 8th one that we're doing. And so far, we haven't had any significant glitches. The topic today is in many ways perhaps the most important. All of them have been quite important, but I think most of us would agree that the #1 asset of our companies is our employees, and keeping them gainfully employed and safe during this challenging time is certainly very, very important to all of us. So the subject matter is absolutely critical. Thankfully, once again, we have a nice diverse variety of speakers from different positions in their companies and also from different parts of the world. which is, I think, one of the other reasons these webinars have been so successful. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone who's joining us today for participating. We encourage you to comment on the presentations and the subject matters presented. Nelson and I chat with each other every week, and we like to get the input from folks to see, to verify if we're on the right track, and if there are other subjects that people would like to hear about, we'd certainly like to hear that from you. So with that, I'm going to stop, turn it back to Nelson, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our experts and then hearing your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to provide some answers. So back to you, Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. You keep impressing me every time we do this, because we are now in Central European time about midday, and you've been up all morning in the United States. So I suspect a lot of participants are coming from different parts of the world, and I do empathize with them. But on that note, I'm like to invite our first speaker, who is a board member of FIDIC, Luis, who is actually from Spain, to share with us. Luis is the CEO of his company. This company is focused on consultancy and engineering with footprint across Europe and Latin America. Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, dear Nelson, and thanks to FIDIC for inviting me to participate in this successful webinar series. Well, I think that one of the many things that we have had to learn in this crisis has been to manage our staff at distance, remotely, something that we were not prepared. The general rule with which our companies has been living since the start of the outbreak until now has been the lockdown. In this situation, part of our staff is working at home, is teleworking. But there is another part of our staff, and very little is said about this, that is in idle time or with a very low productivity. And that has been, at least in our case, because the pandemic occurred without any warning. It hardly gave us any reaction time. Let me tell you, in Spain, the government decreed the state of alarm, and Sunday, starting with a total prohibition of working on Monday, and impossible to react. When it happened, not all the companies were equally prepared. Big companies were better prepared. First of all, because they have a lot of resources, and in this case, technical resources. And in these companies, for almost everything, they have a procedure. And procedure works very well at distance. But in our industry, in Spain, in Latin America, there are a lot of small companies that belongs to a single shareholder, 2 or 3 shareholders. Everything revolves around him. This is what I call face-to-face management. These companies has been surprised in the pandemic without any preparation. I saw in my company that the impact of the lockdown in our staff is closely linked to the socio-cultural conditions of each country, and that has complicated the management of the staff. And I suppose that that happened also to many multinationals. In our case, in my company, we work in more than 50 countries, and the reactions of our people have been very different from one place to another. A very curious reaction that we have observed is that many contacts between personnel from different countries have increased, while curiously, in the same country, the level of communication between the people in the country has decreased. This reaction has been particularly important in Spain, probably due to the Latin mindset that links communication with proximity. In general, we have had to adapt to consecutive government regulations, which in many cases has been contradictory and unclear. This lack of definition has been particularly important in Spain, affecting to the Spanish labor law. In Spain, we have a legal figure that is called temporary workforce restructuring plan that allows the company to, on a very small portion of time, to reduce the employment. Obviously, the crash of the market because the virus allows the company to use this tool. But the many changes in the legislation, in the law, during the last 2 months have created tensions in discussing and negotiating with the unions the application of this tool, and has created a lot of insecurity among employees. Having said that, it's difficult to me to draw conclusions from what happened during the lockdown. Why? Because I don't have a reliable feedback from my colleagues. Because the information and reporting flows are damaged. We can be aware or not, but I'm fully convinced that they are damaged. And because I have several doubts about the management reports that we are obtaining. Also because the contacts I was referring above are neither regulated nor registered, and we don't know really how long those contacts were, which was the matter they were discussing, etc. Therefore, it's difficult for me to draw conclusions. In most countries, we are finishing the phase 0, the lockdown, and we are facing to return to back, returning to normal, something that many people call the new normal. One expression that, I'm very sorry, scares me a lot. Because in my opinion, normal is not new, and new is not normal. So I don't want exactly what that means. Once again, returning to work follows the rules established by authorities of each country and region, which not always are the best for our industry. It is clear that nowadays, the priority #1 of the companies is to guarantee the safety and well-being of our staff. But there are another issues that must be extremely analyzed. This crisis has psychologically affected our employees. There are people that got used to telework, and now they are reluctant to return. This is something that happens very commonly in ladies with kids. They are reluctant now to come back, mainly because they don't know what's going to happen with the schools. So normal. Additionally, there is an obvious feeling of fear. A single sneeze can be cause for a conflict. I'm not joking. I'm talking about something that happened in my company last week, a real event. Companies, we have the responsibility, that means liability, to ensure the return to work in the best conditions for our people. But we will have to deal with several constraints. For example, the lack of PPE and the risk of breaking several laws, like discrimination law, privacy, and data protection. Another 2 samples. Last week, one of our employees returning back to the office, he asked for a clear proof that the people surrounding him was not affected. The only possibility you have to do that is to make a test. But according to the Spanish law, this is forbidden. Only with a formal authorization of the employee, you can do that. And the people surrounding this employee refuse to do the test. What can we do? And another case. In all the programs that my company have established in all the world to return to work, we are telling the people come back in different steps. The last step that will take place in 2 or 3 months is the, let's say, the most risky people. And in this kind of people is included the people older than 60. One employee in another country different, also Spain, sue the company considering that this is discrimination. So it's complicated. And we are learning every day, and we are facing different problems every day. And this is because for me today, it's very difficult to assess the negative and positive impact of this pandemic. I cannot predict the relationships between employees, how will be the relationships between employees and with our employees. What I'm totally sure is that will be very different. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, for that very good panoramic view of how you are dealing with the situation in your organization. I like the way you cover that different countries have different agenda, but I think the key point that I pick up from that is the legal implication of what is happening now and how companies need to respond to different expectations of employees and even potential issues of discrimination and how company will wrestle with that. On that note, I'm going to move on to the next speaker, really, Anne, who is Managing Director of MacDonald Group in Greater China, based in Hong Kong, but with footprint also in China. Anne, I'm going to ask you to take the floor and probably share your experience and suggestion and advice for the industry. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Nelson, and hello everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to join this panel discussion and also to share some of the arrangements that we at MacDonald are putting into place and have put into place to highlight differences and approaches across the different countries that we work in. So we work across the globe in about 180 different countries. So yes, like Luis, we have a lot of different people, a lot of different responses, and a lot of different timing issues. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit was the context. I wanted to also say that in Hong Kong, I'm based here and have the Greater China role, and we have been operating our business as per normal in many ways, all the way through this situation. But to put the context as well, so Luis, you said there was no indication, but actually in November and December, we were watching in China a very, very virulent strain of winter flu. We were getting quite worried about it because we have had SARS in Hong Kong, we've had SARS in the region, and we've had all the effects of SARS and the concerns that has spread through our industry and spread through the communities as well. So we're very fearful. That was 2003. So in early January, I started telling the group board in London that we've got this real concern that there's a possible SARS Mark II going to take effect. And everyone was saying, oh, you're doing fine, everything's fine, no worries, keep us informed. And nobody was really paying too much attention to this. But what I was looking at was people were, just as you said, Luis, people were very worried. If you sneezed in the office, if you did, then somebody would look at you very alarmedly and they would think that you had a problem. So what we said was, okay, right, first of all, we need to be aware and alert in case this is a virus that is a little bit more virulent than a winter flu. So I asked all colleagues immediately at the beginning of January to only have meetings, if face-to-face meetings, if they were absolutely essential, to ask all clients if they could do virtual meetings and to try to avoid face-to-face events because it was the winter and the flu season. This was also between the New Year and Chinese New Year, so there weren't so many events taking place and so forth. I also said that we were not having people coming into the office, so we banned visitors to the office, and I banned any external food coming into the office. So there were a few minor details, but we were watching. We went on Chinese New Year holidays at the end of January, and then the explosion took place in terms of the numbers and so forth. We then really ramped up our efforts and we put into effect a kind of lockdown of our office. But we asked our colleagues what they wanted to do because our government in Hong Kong and the government in China mainland had gone into working from home. We asked our colleagues, do you want to go into work from home? Shall we go into team A, team B working, or shall we keep the office open and have flexible working and flexible times for using mass transit to come to work? Because 98% of our colleagues come to work by mass transit railway, so the railway or the buses. Our colleagues said, we want to keep the offices open because a lot of people find in very small apartments, so in Asia we have very small apartments, people are living maybe multiple family units, etc. But with small confined spaces, it's super stressful to actually try to work from home. Also, the children had been put on homeschooling since the beginning of January. So therefore, there were children at home trying to be schooled, there were people trying to do homeworking, there were grandmothers who were trying to look after children, and so on and so forth. So the colleagues said, we want to keep the office open, but have flexible working. So throughout the period from end of January to now, we've had about 20% of our staff doing flexible working on and off. We've got pregnant women, of course, and people who are in vulnerable communities and with vulnerable healthcare effects who are working from home. But we've put all sorts of things into effect, and this was all about what we'd learned from SARS. So immediately, no handshakes, no physical contact, social distancing rules, and no gatherings, and absolutely no mass gatherings in the office, and so forth. We looked at putting hand sanitizers on every desk. Everybody wears a mask in the office, and 100% of us wear masks. I'm sitting here in the office and I'm not wearing my mask, but that's only because I'm in my room and I have cleaned the desk, and I will clean the desk after I leave this event. So we then also put into effect temperature checks. So our building management systems have temperature screening and so forth. We've got lots of thermometers around. So it's all to make people feel more comfortable as well. This doesn't stop, the mask doesn't stop you getting the virus, but it certainly does help you protect other people from your potential droplets, etc. So we were very, very clear that we were keeping business going as usual, but being very flexible in the way that we allowed people to come into work if they wanted to come in at 11 o'clock in the morning, to avoid many people on the mass transit system. We also allowed people who were working from home to work from home in their own way, but they had to submit a log. They had to tell us on a weekly basis what they had been doing, and they had to also demonstrate that they had adequate desks and chairs and internet provision and so forth. But they also had to do something, which was they had to get up every morning and dress for work and get on a call at 8:30 every morning and at 5:30 in the afternoon with their team leader. The dress for work issue was quite important, and in our Asia and Australia and New Zealand business, we were saying this is really important because we want to keep a routine and a rhythm and a program going so that people can feel as though they're working normally. Relationships have changed. So relationships within the office have changed because people are recognizing that the first thing that we must do is protect ourselves, protect our colleagues, protect our families and our friends. And so it's very much about looking after each other. And this is the line that we use all the time. In the context as well of looking at this from the perspective of people going to work from home, like in Spain, across the world, there were many, many quick, immediate reactions by governments to put people into a work from home environment. And what we discovered was a lot of people were very anxious about that because they live on their own, they work from home, and they were very nervous about how they were going to deal with that isolation. So we instigated something called check-in. And so all you had to do was put your hand up and say you wanted a check-in, and somebody then from the region that you're working within calls in every day to make sure that you're all right and everything's fine and you're feeling connected and so forth. We also have webinars on nutrition, and these are on a weekly basis. We've got weekly exercise routines and regimes, and on a Monday we do meditation, and these are led by practitioners in the field. So we've got nutritionalists in the company, and we've also got meditation experts and so on and so forth. These are not professional qualified meditation people, but these are people who are looking at the well-being aspects. Then there's the client focus. So very, very interesting. Our focus quickly turned from looking after ourselves and our colleagues, because we're doing that anyway, to how can we look after our clients? So our conversations, so I ask everybody on a Monday morning, make 3 calls this week to a client that you haven't spoken to last week. Make 3 calls to somebody who is within our network that you're not naturally talking to on a project basis, and ask them how they're doing. ask them how they're thinking about getting out of this, ask them about what are the opportunities and so forth. We see lots of opportunities coming out in terms of the business, so the conversations are really, really interesting because everybody's wanting to talk to each other about how they're seeing the new normal. As you said, is what is new and what is normal. But everybody's talking about what's going to happen and when are we going to start moving, when are we going to travel, etc. The biggest concern is about our people and their families and friends. So we've been also doing a lot of webinars, of course, but we've also been doing things like, so I have got a lot of videos that I put on, 2-minute videos to clip around to show my colleagues who are in other offices that I can't go to visit. So I can't go to the Beijing office, I can't go to Shanghai, I can't go to Singapore, etc. But what I can do is send out a message every week. And so this week it's all about families and friends. It's all about just look at the person next to you and ask them, how are your friends? So here we are in Hong Kong, and we've got 3 people who are Spanish, who've got brothers who are frontline doctors in Madrid, etc. So it's easy for us to say, hey, how are your family doing? You know, and so these are the things that are very much at the front of people's minds. It's very much a case of look after each other. I think there are some very positive outcomes that have come from making sure that people are recognizing that everybody's got a family member or a friend in another country which is being very badly affected. So in Hong Kong, we are absolutely lucky that we have had so few deaths. But I don't think that comes about by accident. And I think that that's one of the big lessons that we can learn. I think that comes about by the fact that we individually in the companies, as well as governments, were focused and watching and being very, very clear and careful about putting actions and things into place very early on. We also put into place a lot of the preventative measures so that we didn't have anybody going out to bars or restaurants or theatres or gyms, etc. We were recommending people actually, if they came to work, they then went home, and that was all that they did. And that's been very hard. And you know, we've gone way past our 3-month period, so we've had this from the beginning of January. But it is very clear that looking, recognizing, and being prepared. I think also practically in the office, we've been updating our risk registers. So we've been looking at the risk registers for the projects and identifying what's the risk of the project. So it might be material and logistics supplies and supply chains being truncated or stopped because of factories not working. And is that affecting our construction site and progress, etc.? Is that potentially going to affect our payments, etc.? So the risk registers have been very important. We've been looking and having a running total in terms of the costs to the business and the cost of keeping the business open, which is not insignificant, I have to say, because the cost of masks went up 100 times in the peak in March. And so, you know, instead of spending $1 on a mask, you were spending $100 per mask. It was outrageous. But also, you know, we are doing a lot more cleaning of the office. So people are asking for a weekly deep cleaning of all the carpets and facilities, etc., and the hand sanitizers at all these facilities. But this is about looking after our people and looking after the business and making them feel comfortable about coming into the space where they are going to be protected and able to deliver their work. So I think that it's absolutely essential for us as an industry to reinforce our risk management, to reinforce the mitigation measures, to keep a very, very watchful eye. Also, I think that the V, the W, the U-shaped curve, and I think we could have all of the above. I think that in different places, we're going to have different responses because it's a cultural thing as well. So, you know, looking at our offices in Japan and the cultural aspect of going to work, and work defines you. If someone is working from home, then what are they? Who are they? They are undefined. So I find this an absolutely fascinating social study, but I wish it wasn't such a devastating social study for us, and that is the problem. So across the businesses, we need to build resilience and we need to keep vigilant because this is not an isolated incident. This will come back in different forms and different shapes. I think that while we have in Greater China been open and kept our offices open, the rest of the world is now coming into this situation whereby they are looking at how do we come out of this. We were having conversations yesterday with Australia and New Zealand, who are coming out 50-50 in Team 18B in May, and people are by and large anxious about coming back to work, because who has been in touch with who, and who is connecting with who, and is it going to be a resurgence of the virus? But in reality, I think most people are actually wanting to come back and get that social context, because I think it's all well and good. We all love working from home, we all love the flexibility, etc. But we all absolutely, in our profession, need and thrive on that interconnectivity that we have and that social engagement that we have. We can't deny it. We need to be together and to talk face to face at times. So I'd like to stop there and say there are a lot of lessons that we can learn, a lot we can share, and it's really important that we do learn from this and go forward with more resilience in our business.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that very detailed outlook of how you've dealt with the issue there. I have quite a lot noted in your suggestion. I suspect the big one that I want to pick up is perhaps your experience to SAR gave you a head-on advantage of being prepared for it, and you anticipated and you put all the right measures in place. There's a lot of points that you raised that I would like to come back to later on. Issue about work from home, client focus, the impact on people, and actually the concept of picking up the call and speak to 3 clients a day and 3 person a day, or everybody around you, and getting conversation going, because that itself is critical one to keep things going. So Anne, thank you very much for that insight. I'm going to invite Benoît from Artelia to share his experience with us. They're a company that in excess of thousands and thousands with global footprint, very much like Mott, to give us their own experience on how they've dealt with the issue and what the concerns are going forward. So Benoît, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you around the world. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today and share with you my experience and a few messages from what we have experienced over the past few weeks now. In these extraordinary circumstances, I think we all understand that more than ever, our business is all about the people. And when I say the people, we all realize also more than ever that we not only have colleagues or employees, we have men and women, we have parents, we have children, we have young people, elderly staff as well. And this is the reality that we have really touched. We have experienced some disease in some families, unfortunately a few fatalities. So really it completely modifies the overall context. As many companies, we try to be somewhat prepared because we have some operations in Asia. 75% of our business is in Europe though, so we had a crisis unit put in place, but still it was a big shock, like a bomb exploding in front of you, and all of a sudden you have many challenges to face at the same time. And if I want to highlight a few ones, we had an IT challenge, we had an HR challenge, we had a communication challenge, a management challenge. I don't want to spend too much time on the IT challenge. Everybody understands that all of a sudden we almost had 100% of our staff, the 6,000 people around the world, switching to teleworking. And in a context where all the cyber attacks didn't decrease, they increased actually. So more than ever, we had to tackle that issue. But I think we can highlight a little bit on the communication side, because once again, we also realized that it was a lot about communication, and not corporate speech with our staff, but talking people to people, and talking, writing, and also in those times you have to explain what you are doing as a CEO and as a managing team. With direct communications, I shot videos to all my staff every other week. I organized some regional meetings with the managers, in Asia, in Middle East, in Africa, in Europe, of course. And that's also the case. I asked my managers to do that with their respective teams, to remain in close contact, communicating again and again, and explaining what we are undergoing and what we are working on. So communication is key in those times. Of course, it was also a management challenge. Because at those times you also realize that the first ones that are exposed are your first line managers. They get all the pressure. They get the pressure from their staff, who are a bit destabilized or can be destabilized. They get the pressure from the clients. Some are disappearing. Some are present more than ever and asking thousands of questions and asking you to be on board and everything. So it was also we put a lot of effort in supporting them, and supporting them to reorganize the work, to adjust to teleworking, and this is something that we faced very quickly to adjust our work organization, and because, for example, of course, you move to teleworking, but then you quickly have to face the economic realities. And adjust the staff mobilization to the actual workload, a reduced workload, and uneven depending on continents. So in some countries, fortunately, the governments have mobilized themselves as well and put in place some partial employment schemes to financially support the companies. So everybody has to adjust to that country to country. It's very true in Europe. It's also true in KSA, or in Saudi Arabia, for example. In other countries, there is, of course, no such systems. And then you are faced with harsher decisions. So the other priority that we said was to keep everybody on board, and especially with the lower salaries, people who have low salaries. And for example, if you take the many countries in Africa, people need their daily salary to have food for the families in the evening. So it's a question of survival. So of course there was a few people that we put on leave, on forced leave, but paid leave. But of course we maintained all the salaries to make sure that people had what they need to live. And what you realize as well is that from the very beginning you have also to think about the decontainment, because you kind of dive into containment. But you have to be prepared, and you have to be prepared for a deadline that you hardly know, and especially in terms of logistics. And from my French experience, we were faced with a huge shortage in masks, for example. And so 6 weeks ago we started to buy some masks, and hopefully we got them just a few days ago, to be prepared for next week, which is the official decontainment date in France. So you had to very quickly adapt your work organization and mobilize your first line managers who are exceptionally exposed and need exceptional support. So I told you about IT challenge, communication challenge, management challenge. A few words about the HR challenge. As I told you at the beginning, you have the men and women working with you and in front of you at those times. And we decided to, of course, help the ones who need special help, for example, interns. Because it's, when you have interns just being with the company for a week or 2 weeks, they are kind of lost. They have low incomes. And so we kept them on board as much as we could. We also decided, you realize that some people live very isolated, and communication is key. And as we said earlier, giving phone calls on a regular basis just to say hello, how are you, and making sure that people have as much work as possible. And in those situations, we also try to do the best to make that painful situation also an opportunity to two things: to promote training, and we actively ramped up an e-learning platform. We had a small one, and we accelerated it and offered some training programs. Some were more informative, others were more official training. It could go from how to telework effectively to how to manage your staff from a distance, to risk management or basic accounting or financial management of projects, and also from kind of small or short webinars from experts to share about the knowledge within the group. So we said, let's try to take that moment as an opportunity to learn more and to train. And training is also an opportunity to promote the social interaction between our staff, because isolation is one of the biggest risks. And that's also why we also promoted some personal initiatives that flourished all around the world, and people using the social networks, sharing photos and pictures of their families. And so we saw a lot of kind of, unexpected behaviors, very positive, occurring. And we thought it was important to promote that and to create some additional, first some well-being among our employees, and also additional reinforce the network, because we all know that our companies are really a network of people and network of brains and network of people. Maybe to finish with a few words about the future. Now in many countries we are facing decontainment, but decontainment is on the one hand it's a light at the end of the tunnel, but on the other hand it's still a lot of uncertainty with regards to business, uncertainty with regards to health and safety, about transportation, many other aspects. So, of course, the first focus is to bring back everybody to the offices and to construction sites and to industrial sites as quickly as possible, but of course in a very safe manner. So that's why it will take some time. From the French experience, the official decontainment date is next Monday, the 11th. But we all know that it will take a month to 6 weeks to really come back to the normal office work. We also know that in the short term, I talked about the supporting employment. So I think what we need in the very short term is business, is work. Of course, we all have some order book and some work to perform in the upcoming days, but for some teams it's quite relatively short term. So we need business, we need tenders. That's why we're also pushing our clients, private clients, public clients, national clients. And when I talk can talk also from a European perspective or FCAP perspective, as the future incoming president of the European Federation of Engineers, is that we are really pushing a lot so that public bodies don't stop issuing tenders and awarding tenders, because this is probably at the end of the day what we need most. We need business, we need jobs, we need work to be able to support employment. And maybe to finish with a few reflections. I think if we try to think about a bit longer term, teleworking, at least from the French example, was very extremely low. So we switched from 0% to 100% teleworking. I think the longer term reality will be somewhere in between, which will have an impact on the way we interact within the company, but also on the business, probably on the real estate business of our industry. And also, we are all facing a pandemic that we had never thought it could happen. And it also echoes all the sustainability aspects of our business. Fighting climate change was kind of the center. And now I think we can add resisting pandemics as another aspect of sustainability. And so it encourages us, all of us, I think it's a benefit for our industry in the long run to promote and accelerate on all sustainability related projects. And we are kind of adding another dimension to sustainability. So I think that our business is more than ever, will be more than ever challenging, but more than ever also exciting, because we'll have to add another dimension in the way we design, in the way we study, in the way we design, and in the way we manage our projects. Thank you very much.
Benoît, thank you very much for that very comprehensive approach of looking at it. I think the fact that you raised it that you look at it from the HR challenge communication challenge, IT challenge, and management challenge. That's given us a very good insight to some of the thinking. You know, I mean, I've got quite a lot of things that I would like to come back to you, Benoît, on what you've done, which I think is very similar to Anne and also Louise, but mindful of the time, and we've got good half an hour Q&A session later on. I'm going to move swiftly now to bring in Tim Shaw from Ferry. Tim and his business is about people. And I thought, you know, it may be a good idea to get Tim's view on how they're looking at it globally. And then after that, we can open it up to a sort of a Q&A session. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nelson, and thank you for inviting me, and FIDIC for having me. Firstly, look, I hope everybody on the call, I hope your family, your friends and colleagues are healthy during these challenging times, unprecedented times, and I hope you are all well and dealing with the current circumstances as well as possible. For those of you that don't know Korn Ferry, we are an American organizational consulting firm. We have about 50 offices around the world. We've been established for about 50 years. We have about 9,000 people. I'm a partner. I'm based here in our London office. I'm responsible for all our work in engineering, construction, and the broader infrastructure sectors. Very briefly, we cover 5 key areas. Our roots are in executive search, so appointing senior leaders, and me particularly, into engineering, construction, infrastructure firms around the world. And we have 4 other strands to our business which play to our topics today around employees and managing the well-being of employees. And they are leadership development, organizational design and strategy, assessment and succession, and rewards and benefits. So unlike many of you on the call and my co-speakers, what I don't bring to the table is hands-on practical knowledge of managing teams out on sites or in design studios. But what hopefully I can provide you with is a sense of what we are seeing leaders around the world doing, and how they are approaching this incredibly important topic we're talking around in these really challenging times. So with the topic in mind, it sort of got me thinking, what are the good leaders doing, and what can we as a collective learn from them? How are they managing employment risks? How are they managing their employee crisis? And it won't surprise you that my co-speakers today have already touched on a number of these points. I've spoken to clients. We've undertaken a larger piece of research, and there are sort of 8 key traits that strong leaders are showing. I'll just touch on those briefly and then move into sort of how we are seeing those manifest themselves. So what we are seeing leaders, or how we are seeing leaders manage, they are being purposeful. They're constantly reminding people why it is so important that they exist and that their organizations exist. And like, I'm very passionate about the sector in which you all work, and I'm privileged to work within as well. There are very few sectors that are as important as infrastructure, engineering, construction, providing water systems, providing transportation systems around the world. And we are seeing key leaders be purposeful around that and really emphasizing that. We are seeing them being very empathetic, acknowledging the stress that others are finding themselves in today. We are seeing leaders be calm, clear, confident, communicating with realness, clarity, and I guess most importantly, authenticity. Leaders are showing them what it's like in their home offices with their kids running in, or bring them a coffee, or so on and so forth. There's some real authenticity into the way that these challenging circumstances are showing themselves. Leaders are being both action-oriented and reflective, and they are being inspiring. They're sharing stories with their teams that inspires their colleagues to continue to drive in the right direction. They're also being resilient. They're taking care of their energy, their wellness, their fitness. It's one of those things that can be quite quickly forgotten about when you're not in your normal routine. jumping on the train or into the car to go into work, and you're sat in your home office. But leaders are demonstrating that by posting. I've seen leaders posting their Strava results as to how they are doing 5-kilometer runs, and that's critical. They're also being very aware of mindset. And as we move to returning to our offices over the coming weeks, and some offices around the world have already done that, moving away from a fixed or a fear mindset into a growth mindset, and how we try and make the most of these challenging times. And then the 8th point is around courage, making tough decisions on purpose and with courage. And that moves me on to thinking sort of about how does that manifest? Now, a number of my co-speakers today have already touched on a number of these points, but I'll briefly touch on them again, because what I'm looking at here is what we have seen from the research we've undertaken around the world of what leaders are doing. Firstly, it's frequent, candid, consistent, and personal communications, both the formal and the informal. There is no such thing as over-communicating right now. Things are changing fast, and leaders must and are connecting with employees in real time as real people. And candor is the most important thing here. They're putting health and safety at the top of the agenda. As I touched on earlier, that they understand that everybody's going to approach this slightly different. Some people won't be fearful of using public transportation systems, but an awful lot, and probably the vast majority, will be. Putting that health and safety at the top of the agenda is critical, and that's what leaders are doing. They are being realistic about the promise and the reality of technology. Is Zoom working? Thankfully it is at the moment. Is Teams working? And so on and so forth. And that it's not going to work all the time. They are also taking employees' personal challenges seriously and providing true resources. Korn Ferry's global database of employee opinion indicates that 1/5 of employees, full stop, around the world, lack an adequate understanding of what their benefits are. And as they struggle with personal issues and worries, the best leaders are really emphasizing what their medical options are, what their health insurance is. They're bringing that to the fore so that they really understand that. Rethinking of time management. I think leaders are, and I know leaders are, really understanding that if work days need to be rearranged, they can be rearranged. I've seen so many dual working families split their day in half. One half starting at 6 and finishing just after lunch, and the other starting just after lunch and finishing in the early evening, so that they can manage childcare responsibilities and the like. And there's much more flexibility in that regard. They're honing in on what is critical and what can wait. And they are acknowledging that employees' experiences are going to be very different and are ever changing. And the last few points, and critical as they are, 8th is addressing rewards and performance metrics. There will be people that are worried about pay, worried about reduced hours, worried in a furloughing sense, redundancy sense, and we've seen across the sector a number of organizations reduce pay. So what does that look like for them? And Benoît touched on that and how that affects people, and that's critical. And then the last 2 points, acknowledging and tackling the gap in informal interaction. And research does show that productivity can be the same or even better when people are working remotely. That said, the conversation around the water cooler can be lost. And how does that get replaced? And again, what I've seen personally within Korn Ferry, and I've seen with my clients, is informal lunches or bacon sandwiches and a coffee in the morning, or cocktail hours on Friday nights, bringing in that informal interaction. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is giving people a voice. We're seeing the leaders give their teams a voice. Taking all of the above steps will meaningfully improve engagement and productivity during the crisis. But they they will fall flat unless you implement a final initiative, which is giving employees a real palpable channel to express what they think, what their concerns are. So above all the aforementioned 9 points in terms of how this is manifesting itself in managing employees, their health, their well-being, is giving people a voice. And I know a number of my co-speakers have already touched on how critical that is and that they are doing that within their organizations. Thank you.
Team, thank you very much for that external perspective on the subject. I mean, I know you did say that you are not a practitioner in the consulting industry, but actually the way you travel the journey about the key things and what makes a good leader, I think that's where you started off with it, those 8 traits of being purposeful, being action-driven, resilient, aware, mindful, and courageous, and all those issues are critical. And I think was, exemplified by Anne's conversation, also Louis' conversation, and Benoît, they all talk about that. And that's quite important. And you then drive on the issue about communication. You talk about how that is actually quite passionate. And I'm actually going to bring Andy in later on. But some of the point that you pick up there, which is really interesting, and I want to start from that. I know that Anne started the conversation, but you touch on the soft side of our people. And you said acknowledging and, managing the gap and looking at the conversation around the water can and the coffee time. These soft issues are so critical and it's missing. It doesn't matter how much productive we are working from home, those extra bit of clicking between staff and employee help us to make things make us more wonder. I just wonder from your experience, team, do you think traditionally our industry relative to other parts of your services, are we good at it or good enough, or do you think we can do more in that space? Because this is so critical. I mean, we can work so hard and get 100% productivity, but then we don't want to get 100% productivity for our people and then find that they crash because the soft skill and the bit that really keeps them going, makes them people, is missing. How is our industry benchmark relative to other industry? Are we good at doing it? Can we improve?
I'll be frank. I think the sector is probably middle of the road. I think there are sectors that the softer skills maybe don't creep into as much, and there are sectors, look at maybe some of the tech worlds, the Amazons, the Googles, where that informality, the jeans and t-shirt type informal dress down approach is much more prevalent. But then they are much newer organizations, whereas the sector in which we work is much more traditional. So I think the sector is middle of the road. I think it is adapting. I think it is changing for the better. And I think that varies again between organizations quite significantly. And our participants on the call today, I think they'll probably see quite significant differences in the organizations for whom they have worked as well. I think what this situation will give us is a real opportunity for change and for advancing in that regard and bringing more informality and innovation to the table going forward. So whilst there is a lot of tragedy and there's a lot of sadness, I think out of the ashes could rise some real innovation and some interesting thinking about how the industry continues to advance in the years ahead.
Thanks very much, team. I'm going to go back in. I'm doing it in reverse. Benoît, you spoke eloquently about how you recognize the difference between what I call the early entry to the market and those who need a bit of TLC in making sure their salary, their income is not damaged. And then very quickly, you touch about the difference between maybe, the West and what you're doing in Africa and somewhere like Saudi Arabia. How challenging has that been to apply the same principle of looking after the well-being of your staff in Africa and also in other parts of the world?
In those situations, you are back to the basics. And some of the basics are the common sense, and try to balance general rules, general objectives, safety first, serving your clients, adjusting to the reality of everybody's life. You know, some have children and young children with closed schools. Others are grandparents, you know, very different realities. So you're back to common sense, pragmatism, and need to make quick decisions. So we had those general objectives: health and safety, serving clients, and helping people, our staff. And then you're also in different contexts, because you're also the different health authorities in all countries with different rules, different views, different maturities, to be honest. And you have to deal with all that. So I think at this time we are, from the general principles, from the support that we can bring from corporate, as much as we can, we have to deal with local realities. So you are back to you know, a decentralized management, and frankly speaking, we have seen a lot of very positive things, and people, you know, I think the best word is responsibility. All along the line, on the chain of command, people have taken their responsibilities at all levels, and this is very this is not much of a surprise, but it's good as a CEO of the company to see that happening in your company. And on the other hand, I think it's also very promising, because it shows that you know, it reveals even more that it's a people business, and also sometimes that by putting too many rules, too many constraints, too many procedures, then you may put some brakes on your company. And here you kind of seeing again all the power, all the strength, and all the initiatives that people can take, and by making their decisions, by communicating, as I said at the very beginning. So, you know, it's been a balance between giving some general directions, being more in a support position from central functions, and let people make the decision locally.
Thank you very much, Benoît. I'm going to go back and now to go actually into Anne. I'm mindful that we are going to open the floor out for questioning, and I've seen a lot of questions coming through, and I'll start to fill that in a minute, but I've got a series of questions to put across. And having the foresight of, you know, what happened in the case of the previous pandemic, or, you know, epidemic in your area, did you think that gave you an added advantage to do the preparatory, get your team ready, and how was that received from non-China based, you know, business? Were they receptive towards it, or it was okay, this is a case of China, it's not going to happen here? What's the reaction, and how do you address that at your management level?
So thank you very much indeed. A very, very good question, Nelson. And I would say, yes, SARS gave us a huge insight. It gave us a massive insight, because we'd been through it, we understood it, we lived it. And so we knew exactly what we wanted to do, which was the social distancing, no handshakes, no connections, etc. I think that was actually very important. But I think it was really interesting because, as I said, we were very much early adopters, or early infected people. And so we were very much at the front end, and people were, yeah, you're dealing with it and that's fine. So I think that there were many other issues that were being dealt with. So, for example, in the UK, where we have a large number of people, they've been going through Brexit and all the implications of Brexit, etc. And that was quite distracting. So from a management perspective, it was a case of, you're dealing with it, that's fine, and you've got everything in place. I think also it was really important to then recognize that very quickly we could help other people and get other people up to the level of understanding of what needed to be done to keep the offices calm and to keep people calm, and also so that people weren't panicking about what they needed to do. And you know, some people said to me, "Oh, we've never seen anything like this before," and I said, "Well, actually we have. There are many examples." And also just think about some history as well. Think about the fact that we also have a lot of healthcare professionals in the business. I myself have some epidemiological experience through my training and all the rest of it. So I was able to talk about, you know, personal experiences, but it was, to Tim's point, it was about keeping calm. It was about being courageous. It was about being resilient. It was about thinking. And, you know, it was all about the management, our local management teams in Greater China were all talking about what do we need to do. And I didn't say, but one of the very first things that we actually did was we identified who was our marker. So who, if I got sick, who was my replacement? And we had a replacement person that was identified for each leadership and each management team member, so that we could actually be sure that we weren't going to have a situation whereby we had all the management out at one go. So I think that it was very much about taking lessons from the past and being very thoughtful, and also trying to think one step ahead.
Thanks very much.
But not trying to tell everybody. So,
yeah, sorry, go on. Thanks, Anne.
so I was just going to say, not trying to tell people that we know it all. Absolutely not. That wasn't our intention. It was very much an intention of, this is what we think. These are the sorts of things that we're doing. So it was sharing.
Thank you very much, Anne. Luis, I'm coming to you now. You talked about people are being fearful of what it means coming back into the office, and how you rebuild the relationship, because this is a real challenge where people come to the office, and if you stage them where you said the older people come in first, other people feel discriminated against. I mean, how do you intend to address that potential challenge of building a new relationship among your staff and having confidence that, you know, they're going to work together the way they used to be, bearing in mind that the new normal will be different from the old normal? So how are you tackling that, Luis?
Well, first of all, we have to fulfill all the legal requirements. Okay. So all the conditions, hygienic conditions, protection of the people, distance among the people, etc. But then we have to make a real effort to understand the mentality of the people and why they are afraid, and to give some time to recover normality. So we cannot demand tomorrow everybody to work and nothing happens, because it's not truth. We have to respect the psychological aspect of our people, and this is what we are trying to do. First of all, to teach the people that the company is trying to fulfill all the conditions to guarantee the health in the return to work. And then, if necessary, to keep time the people to get adapted again. So it's not only a question of applying and using in a very formal way the rules. It's a mix between legislation and human behavior. That's very important for the Latin people. You know that the Latin people, law is the law, but the human law is more important than the legal law. And we have to take into consideration those human aspects of relationship, how to recover the confidence between the employees and the employees with the company. It's not easy. As we saw in the last 2 weeks, it's not easy, but we are doing our best.
Well, I'm going to pick up some questions from the floor now. The first question I'm going to put, which is quite important, but also equally important. This is the issue that I think Tim talked about, that some of the benefit of employee, you need to articulate them, you need to bring them out. This is quite fundamental, very blunt to say, thanks for the beautiful webinar. How is the issue of salary addressed where companies do not have much reserve? So if you don't have the reserve and you don't have income coming through, how do you address that? This came from Sam Otenaike. I'm not quite sure which part of the world it is. So how do you address the issue of salary when your company don't have reserve? Question, who wish to pick that up? I'll probably start off with Benoît. How do you address that? Do I take it that, Artelia has got a good reserve and that's not a problem?
I'm sure that there are other companies in far more difficult positions, but the reality, to balance the human reality with the financial reality of the company, and I think we all have to deal with it. And maybe the first thing I can notice is that most of our clients have behaved quite well, paying even quicker than ever. Some have had some unbearable behaviors. reacting by asking, telling us, you know, do you want to reduce by your fees by 20%, or we sack you? So, but you know, in many occasions, people have the clients have behaved very well, actually. So that's part of the answer. The second is that you know, in some countries, probably the wealthiest ones, many countries have put in place some emergency funds or plans or you know, capabilities to borrow money. And many companies, and I know in France and some other European countries have used that possibility. And so that's a second part of the answer. And then you have to tap into your accounts, because you know, for Artelia, we are management owned. We have 6,000 staff and 700 shareholders, and the priority is the people. They come first before the shareholders, and shareholders are there, they're on board. So you know, if so, you know, everybody has to be up to its responsibility, and the priority is to keep the jobs and to pay the salaries. And maybe to finish with, in some countries, people have accepted to reduce temporarily their salary by, you know, 10, 15, 20% sometimes, and to share the burden. And you know, I really commend that behavior. It shows the commitment, and it shows also that, you know, when times are difficult, they are difficult for everybody, and you know, everybody needs to take this part of the burden. I'm not sure if it addresses the question, but you know, it's always combining different dimensions and aspects to try to bring some, you know, appropriate solution.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Benoît. There's a question for Anne, and it says, what is the chance of winning a suit against the company if you get sacked as a deployee because of the COVID-19? Is there any law that can actually protect any employee if your, you know, company decided, well, you are surplus to requirement, and therefore, you know, you are laid off? Is there any protection at all, you know, that can cover that employee? And
well, that is a question and a half, and I'm going to skip it because I'm going to say I'm not an employment lawyer, and also I think that across the world employment law varies so dramatically, and every jurisdiction has a different situation. So that actually is it's a very difficult question for me to answer. So apologies to the person who asked the question, but I can't answer, sorry.
I mean, I think that's a very good response, in the sense that different jurisdictions have different rules. It's very difficult to actually, you know, lay any specific issue. If I may come into that, I think Benoît said, you know, every employer have a responsibility to do the best during this time, because we spend in our industry campaigning that we haven't got the right resources. And unfortunately, we are now at a point where the industry still want to encourage more people to come to the industry. And because we have a shock in the industry, and some companies may say this is an opportunity to lay people off, which in a way, they have to look at their balance sheet. One of the topics we'll be looking after in future is how do you protect your balance sheet? But actually, I talk about balance sheet. It's not really just about the money. It's about the people. It's about the resources. It's about the talent that is important, and finding a way to harness them during difficult time actually give a very good and positive perspective on the employer in terms of their relationship with their employee. So that's a good point. So thank you very much for that. There was a question here that actually got addressed to Benoît. And it said, do you think that the readiness of remote working is less or higher? You talked about, you know, now that we are doing remote working, and I'm not quite sure whether it was you or it was Luis that talked about, we've gone from 0 remote working into 100% remote working. Is that the new norm for the future? In another word, are we likely to get to the point where your office is completely wasted because everybody wants to work from home? Or do you see a new dynamics where there will be people who want to work from home, they will still deliver? Or do you see sort of a complete shift in pattern? Benoît, yours?
I think we can all comment about this. You know, I would like to refrain from making quick conclusions. You know, everybody now has turned to become a prophet and about the future and the new future and the day after and so on. My perspective is that there will be a change, definitely. And we have all experienced over the past weeks that some meetings have been very effective. You know, in 2 or 2.5 hours, you can do a lot. We can reduce travels, which has a positive impact on finance and on the climate and on the environment. So I think we will all learn from that and find quite a balance. It was also mentioned that you know, everybody's, you know, if you make a survey and ask, you know, apart from transportation issues and so on, would you like to come back to the office or stay at home forever to work? I guess we would have 90% plus were willing to come back to work in the office. So because we need that social interaction, and everybody, you know, every human person is growing and becoming who he is or she is through his personal life and through his or her professional life. So we need both, and being in the office is, or on a construction site or whatever, is part of that. So I think there will be more teleworking, working from home. It will have an impact on the way we work. I think we will gain in effectivity, in efficiency. But my bet, if I had to make one, is like 80 to 90% at work and 10 to 20% from teleworking.
Luis, do you have any view on the same question? Yeah. Can you unmute, please? Can you unmute, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Alonso. You know, all my life, I thought that the future is the only thing that is impossible to envisage. So what is going to happen is difficult. It's difficult to see. Obviously, the telework will increase. I'm totally sure, but I don't know how much. In our industry, we are starting to develop new production tools like the BIM and another softwares related with EIS, etc. All those mechanisms demand very, very heavy informatic tools, big computers, big screens, and there is an additional point. In many contracts, you have to guarantee the security of the contract and the development of the design. I cannot guarantee that someone working at home could be fully protected from virus, from hackers, and even from a kid touching the screen. So how we'll develop the activity at home is something that will take time. For consultancy, for purely consultancy, in my opinion, will be a lot of people working at home. But in the purely design, and don't tell anything about job site supervision, in this case, it's absolutely impossible. So I don't know exactly if this tender will be majority with the time mean or not. Will be more, but not totally, not totally. And I insist, it's related with the mindset of the country. For Latin people, the contact is absolutely necessary. And something that told Anne, and I never thought about, that in Asia, the people is living in very small apartments and it's complicated to work at home. So many factors that will be involved in the future evolution of this tendency.
Thanks very much. I mean, team, I'm going to put the same question to you. Obviously, looking through how the global leaders are looking, do you think the reaction will be very much positive, that it's going to be more of home working or less home working, about, you know, what Benoît and Luis is talking about? What's your perspective? Can you unmute, please? Yeah.
So I agree with the points that Benoît, Luis, and Anne have made. I think that time will tell, and it will vary significantly by geography. However, I think one overarching thing is, I think this could be a real opener of untapped talent for the industry because of the flexibility. We are seeing our employees work efficiently from home, which we probably haven't seen before in a lot of cases. And therefore, what could that mean? Can it mean that single mothers who are looking after their children who can't work before their kids are in bed at 7 can then work for 4 or 5 hours later in the evening if they want. I think there's opportunity for talent that hasn't been able to work in the sector before that could come forward. So I think there will be an element of returning to normal as people return to the offices. I think we will have to manage employers' anxieties about using public transport, and I think there will be less people returning to the office initially in some geographies. In other geographies, I think it will return to normal relatively quickly because that is part of the way certain geographies work. But I think when you look at the industry as a whole, I think it could offer real opportunity for talent that hasn't been tapped into in the past if it promotes itself in the right way as a flexible working environment. Now, again, it depends very much on the organization. Some organizations are much more design-led and therefore you're much more likely to be in the office versus site-led. But I'd even sort of argue the case in a site-led context. 2 weeks before the lockdown happened in the UK, I was with a senior leader in a construction company. And I guess more traditional values in that he didn't believe that a project director couldn't be on site. They had to be on site all the time. My argument was, why was that? A good project leader should be a good leader. And therefore, if they are a good leader, their teams beneath them should be strong enough to manage that site. So therefore, why can't you have flexible working in a project context and have 2 people, working parents, for example, splitting their day half and half on that site rather than a single project director that has to be on it. So I think there's going to be a quite significant period of time, and I think it will vary between geographies, but I think there could be real opportunity here for new ways of working, new ways of thinking about talent that could come into the sector. This is an incredibly purpose-led sector. The sector delivers some of the most important programs around the world. And I think that appeals to an awful lot of people.
Thank you very much. There's a question that came through from the floor. It's targeted towards Benoît. You're very popular, and Anne and everybody. But actually, I'm going to put it to everybody. I think the question that came, I will rephrase it. How do you manage the risk that is associated with people being asked to isolate themselves at home because of government decision, when in fact they are not affected by the COVID-19 and they have issues? So from that point of view, you ask them to work from home. Does your insurance and does your employee liability cover, does it cover them when they're at home? When in fact, your coverage is actually more or less in office. So question, how do you address that challenge? I hope none of your staff are going through that, but what happened in that scenario? How do you deal with that? Very quickly, Benoît.
I don't know all the exact details of that, but the reality is that if people are working from home, they are working. So they are employees of the company because they are working. So yes, they are covered. And, and we saw, that's why I insisted earlier on the communications and daily communications for people who are on working, of course, but also the ones who are on partial unemployment. So they're at home, but we keep on talking with them and saying, okay, are you okay? How are you? And we had some instances where people felt extremely bad, and some even ended in the hospital because after 3-4 weeks they couldn't bear the isolation anymore. So yes, we've done. They are insured. They are supported by the company, but isolation is also the way you experience it, the way you live it is also very personal, and so our duty is to let the ones who can support it the best be with their families and so on, and the ones who need more support, it's our duty to support them the best we can.
Okay. Before I wrap up, because we've got roughly about 5 minutes to go, and I'm going to invite Bill Howard to give us a closing sum later. But just to do that, I'm going to invite each panelist to give us one word of advice. The reason for that is we've started this program. We are running a series of items, and I'm looking at it. What do you think FIDIC should be looking at moving forward so that we can address a global issue impacting our industry. One of the things that Benoît talked about is it's now important. We've dealt with the crisis. We need to look at the health and well-being of the industry. We also need to look at, how do we get pipeline coming through? So how do we convince government on investment that's coming through? If we are going to do all this, I keep the health and safety of our industry intact, encourage more people to come to our industry, and also, advocate the investment in infrastructure. What would be your advice, to FIDIC as to one thing that we should be doing? So I'm asking for one sentence from each of you. So I'm going to start with Anne. Ladies first, Anne. Can you unmute Anne, please? Thank you.
Jamie, it's a very difficult question to answer in one sentence, but I would say resilience, 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 and take lessons from the past. Look to the past, and that will give you a huge amount of clues going forward. Also think about putting people first, and make sure that you're understanding that not one size fits all across the globe as well. We have very different rates of recovery. We've also got very different responses, so the cultural aspects are important. So look at every situation on its own and be as flexible. I think flexibility and resilience are the two watchwords for us.
Thank you very much, Anne. I'm going to go into Luis. Now, what's your advice? What should we be doing within FIDIC and to address this issue on behalf of the world?
Well, so far we only had a couple of months with problems, and the real problems will come in the near future. The near future, so today we have to focus on the health of our people, but we are talking about continuity of our business. We are the continuity of our companies. And that will happen only if we have new jobs, new work. And that FIDIC could play a very important role, establishing contacts with the NDBs, with the IFAs, and with the local governments to establish extraordinary investment plans in infrastructure that will help our companies to survive. If not, our segment is going to have a strong problem.
Thank you very much. Team, same question for you.
Hi, I think the return on investment in infrastructure is significant. And I think one of the key things here is purpose. It's one of the most purposeful sectors, bar none, in the world, in my opinion. I think some of the things that my co-speakers, their organizations, and our speakers and our participants, I think purpose is key. Reminding people what the sector does, how important it is in day-to-day life, and connecting people to one another and connecting people to their families, friends, and work life. I think that will be key, both for employees, but for governments as well, as we return to a new way of working in the years forward.
Thanks very much. Benoît, your advice, what should we be doing? How should we be tackling and positioning ourselves in the future?
I was thinking exactly what Luis was saying about, kind of the short term is to provide us jobs. We need to work. So, encourage all governments and MDBs and so on, not to stop tenders and to issue tenders to support the business. But in the longer run, I think, it will change the way we design buildings with the pandemics to be more resilient. It will change the way or modify the way we design our cities, obviously, transportation and so on. So we can see also this difficult episode as an opportunity to bring more value in our business. And, we need to be more creative than ever. It's an opportunity to bring more value in what we do, in what we study, in what we design. And I think the message to FIDIC could be to continue what you've done forever, is to also promote the way our clients procure. And it's more than ever, it needs to be less on price and more on the value added that we bring, especially with when what we are going to design will be more complex than ever.
Thank you very much. And Bill, I'm going to ask you to give us one sentence or a couple of sentences to try and wrap up, and I'll close that on time. We are running out. So Bill?
All right, thank you very much, Nelson. And summarizing this webinar in 1 or 2 sentences is impossible. We all realize it, but I do have a couple of thoughts. One is whenever there's an economic or any kind of crisis like that around countries of the world, we we as FIDIC can repeat and keep telling and educating clients about the value of having shovel-ready or infrastructure projects ready to roll when the recovery takes place. I believe it's proven over and over again that for every dollar, for lack of another currency, invested in infrastructure, the return is more than that. So it certainly is a way to recover. Now, what FIDIC is doing in that connection is historically, we've been producing state-of-the-world reports on various global needs with sustainability, infrastructure. We produced one a few years ago on water. The board is very anxious to get those state-of-the-world reports out very soon, hopefully in the fall, in a much more convenient manner for communication, social media and that kind of thing. So, and starting with presenting the needs for infrastructure, which I think might change a little bit. There's huge needs for infrastructure, but the type of infrastructure because of this pandemic may change. So that's short-term FIDIC action. The other thing I would just mention is I'm pretty much an optimist, and I think young people in particular, particularly the folks that are really good at engineering and math and the STEM areas, the ability to work for firms like ours in a flexible manner, the impact of climate change and now a pandemic upon us, hopefully will encourage our best and brightest young people to pursue careers in professional engineering or in the medical field. I'm kind of optimistic that that will happen and that will help all of us. The final thing, I would just emphasize what many of the speakers said, is predicting the future is impossible. I remember in the 80s, a lot of us were convinced that the starting of Intergraph and all these massive computers for design was going to cause smaller firms the inability to compete because they wouldn't be able to afford them. The opposite happened. So be flexible and understand that predicting the future is not very good. So we can call that one sentence or two sentences, Nelson. Maybe.
More than one sentence is Bilbo, you allow, not the president. May I start by summing up and saying that a lot has been covered on the issue about the impact of COVID on people, our assets, our resources, which makes up what we do. We do not produce widgets. We use our intellectual capacity to deliver sustainable solutions, be it social infrastructure or economic infrastructure, all of which are absolutely critical to well-being of our society. Without us, the society do not exist. So a lot is being said. I do not intend to repeat what is being said, but I want to start off by saying the word that I think was left to us by Benoît, he said, everybody is trying to be the prophet, excluding himself. But we are trying to predict the future, and nobody has the future in their hand. The future is not going to be the same as what it used to be. There will be changes, whether we like it. There will be new norms, which we need to get used to. I hear the word resilient. I hear the word flexibility. I hear the word the future. I hear the word, talk to banks, talk to the investor. I also understand the issue about biggest return on investment come in infrastructure, and we're at the heart of that. For every £1 or $1 invested in infrastructure, there's a huge multiple that comes with that. We operate across the world and we embrace people and we employ people, and we also need to attract people. The well-being of our people during this period and beyond this period is absolutely critical. On this note, I really want to start by thank you all the speakers, Anne, Louise, Tim, and Benoît, and also Bill, for your fantastic contribution to the debate. I want to thank all the participants who's been involved with us from the beginning up until now, and for your contribution by being there, by throwing the question at us. Thank you very much. I also want to thank our staff, Barbara and the rest of it, and Andy, and all those who are behind the scene, making sure that we look good by what you see. There's a lot of work going on behind the scene to make sure we deliver what we deliver. The next session for this program will be looking at how do you defend your balance sheet, secure your business, finance, and ensure liquidity. This is very, very critical. But I actually said some of the subjects we've covered today, the biggest asset in our balance sheet is our people. Having them secure, in good shape, ready to be for future, and be able to deliver what our clients want in a more innovative and more creative way is the biggest asset. So please join us on the 12th of May at the next session where we're looking at how do you defend your balance sheet. On that note, thank you very much. Keep safe wherever you are, and God bless you. Thank you.